This is your tutorial on how you're going to go about combining some pictures together to create a multiple exposure portrait. The first thing I'd have you do is bring in the photo that you've taken of yourself. Open that up in Photoshop. And what we're going to need to do is create a selection of yourself. Keep in mind that we can always resize things, make yourself smaller, make yourself larger in the end if we need to. Click at the top of Photoshop to the Select menu and go down to click on Subject. Let Photoshop think a little bit as it makes the selection. If you're noticing that things aren't quite right in your selection, this is where you'll need to go in to do a little bit more fine-tuning of your selection using one of our selection methods over here. For example, I could use the Quick Selection tool, and I could hold Shift on my keyboard to add in more in my selection if there were parts that weren't selected quite right. You'll notice the Quick Selection tool allows me to add in, or if there was something that I didn't want in my selection, I could hold Alt and minus away from my selection. Photoshop did a pretty good job at selecting myself right in here, so I don't need to do any fine-tuning. But a lot of it depends on the photo that you're working with. Backing on out here again. So our next goal is going to be to create a layer mask. So that way it cuts yourself out. You're going to do that over in the Layers palette, right next to the 50-50 circle. It's a rectangle with a circle in the middle. Go ahead and click that. You'll notice that made a nice layer mask. Anything that's black on the layer mask goes away, anything that's white stays. And even at this point, I could fine-tune my selection a little bit for areas that are missed. Right here, there's a little bit of gray backdrop still showing. All I need to do is select that little area. I'm just going to use my magic wand tool here. And then anything that I paint black with my brush tool disappears. Okay, back to the magic wand tool. Click in that little spot right there, go back to the brush tool, painting black, there it goes. Having a good selection of yourself is going to be the first important thing to do in this project. Next, I want you to make yourself the size that you want to be within your artwork. Hit Ctrl-T on your keyboard, then resize yourself to make yourself the size you want to be. Keep in mind, you can always change your size a little bit later too. After that's done, we're going to create a layer to duplicate ourselves, just so that way we have it as a backup. I'm going to drag this whole layer down to the New Layer button here, and it creates a copy of yourself. We're going to select on this layer mask, and we're going to right-click it, and we're going to click Apply Layer Mask. What we've been able to do is make it so that we have ourselves cut out in a pristine way, and we no longer have a layer mask. We'll be using this as we go forward in the project. Next, let's bring in our first image. Remember, we're going to be bringing in 4 additional images. So the first picture that I'm going to bring in is this picture of the Eiffel Tower. I'm going to make it a little bit larger to start with. I'm just going to click Enter on there. Now you don't need to keep the entire background of each image. You can select what you want to do. On this one, what I'm going to take away is the sky, and I'm just going to use the Eiffel Tower itself. So we're going to go up to the Select menu again here, and I'm going to do Select Subject again. Right, that got a nice cutout of the Eiffel Tower. Then I can go to the Layer Mask button, and there we go, it's cut out. Now you can decide if you want to have some of your objects in front of or behind yourself, but we're going to be combining at least 4 different images together. When you're within this transformation tool, so Ctrl-T, you can also rotate your objects and resize them however you'd like. So I'm going to have the Eiffel Tower off to the side here. Alright, I want to bring something in within myself. That's going to be the next thing that I'll bring in. So, I've got a picture here that includes some city stuff. So I'll bring that in. Now what I'm going to do with this one is actually just bring in, use the same layer mask that I had for myself. So here's how you do that. On this layer that we've hidden that already has a good layer mask, I can click on Control on my keyboard and then click on the layer mask. And that will do a nice selection of what was myself again. Now I've got this layer highlighted with the buildings, and I can create the layer mask button. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little symbol here that looks like a chain, and I'm going to unlink the photo from the layer mask. If I then click on the photo, you'll see how that's highlighted now rather than the layer mask. I can move that photo around within this layer mask. I could resize it. I could rotate it. I can do any kind of transformation that I want to do, just like that. Always hit enter to then escape that mode. Now, as we're combining our images together, you can decide if you want to make those layers slightly invisible to see what's below, or I would encourage you to play around with the different blending options. So right now on the layer mask, or the layer area here in the layers palette, it's on normal. I can change this to one of the other blending modes, and I can have a different effect for how that overlaid photo is affected by myself. This one actually kind of looks cool. This is vivid light. Let me zoom in a little bit on myself here. Now this layer that I had that was just myself below, I could bring that on top of this layer, and I could instead have, parts of this invisible. And I can do that by, actually, I'll do a copy of this first. So, create a copy, bring that on top of this overlaid photo. So now what I could do is make this slightly invisible if I wanted, and I could use the brush tool, painting black on a layer mask. So you saw how I created a layer mask there. Everything's white right now, but I could delete away bits of myself to show more of that image that's within myself below. Everything is about layer order here, so depending on what layer is on top, it's going to affect what's below and how much we see of what's below. So I'm going to bring in another photo here, and I'm going to bring that in behind everything. So here's a photo that I have of some palm trees. I'm going to make this the background layer behind everything. I kind of want to do more of a faded effect for this layer, so I'm just going to make the opacity just a little bit lower. And I'm going to throw in a layer behind that I fill with a certain color. So in this case, I'm going to fill this with white. You see how that can kind of fade in that palm tree layer behind, so it's not as visible, but just a little bit visible. So as you're deciding what you want to combine together, bring in images, select some of them that you want to keep, use layer masks to get rid of things, and you can overlap things to create this multiple exposure portrait. Have fun!